All right. So last week we released, or 2 weeks ago, we released a boundary setting episode. And what's funny is since we released that, I've heard that, people setting boundaries, it makes them feel like a jerk. And so I wanted to do a follow-up episode on how to set those boundaries without sounding like a jerk. Like I just said, people assume boundaries equates to confrontation, telling a client no, having an awkward conversation, risking the relationship. And that framing just isn't helpful. Better framing is that boundaries are filters. They let the right work through and keep the chaos out. And in my opinion, a filter isn't hostile. It's just functional, right? Do you agree?
Well, I totally agree. Yeah, I just, I understand that maybe with that episode we were kind of saying to people, um, here's how to get rich. First, get $1 million. Like, wait,
Yeah.
you know,
What?
yeah, how do I do that? So, set boundaries. So, yeah, so let's talk about how we go about setting boundaries and how that
Yeah.
works.
And I
And,
mean, go ahead. Joe and I have had very few meetings this week together, which is very rare. So we've been interrupting each other for like the past hour. But what I was going to say is, I think what people don't realize is they already have boundaries that they don't think of as boundaries. You don't answer your phone during a client presentation. That's a boundary. You don't work for free. You just have formalized, these are just like, yeah, exactly. um, the ones that we're talking about, they're just not formalized ones, but there's assumed boundaries that people don't consider boundaries, like I just said. And there's a belief, especially I think among solopreneurs, that being available around the clock is good service. And it's just not. It's a signal that your time isn't valuable and that you don't have other important work to protect. I think it actually makes you look like less valuable if you are available around the clock. And clients want reliability. They want to know that that when they reach out, they're getting a competent response, not a desperate "I'm at your service" response, right? Like if you respond at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, that sets a precedent that you're always available, which kind of implies that you don't have anything else going on.
my first solopreneur business, I was a consultant and I was doing work in fiber optics, I had this client and they came to me with this project and it was urgent, 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 needed it done right away. And I was literally working till sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I did this for like a couple of weeks to get this thing done from scratch. And I shipped it off to them. And I made a lot of money because I was working crazy hours. And 2 months later, I'm like, how did that design work out? And they're like, oh, we haven't evaluated it yet. So, I mean, the thing is, the point is that a lot of times urgency isn't really urgency. It's just people wanting to have it now so they don't have to worry about whether they needed it, later. And you really don't want to just assume that somebody that comes in with something urgent is really as urgent as it seems. And that's why having some boundaries, maybe you'll choose to waive them in a real emergency, but to start with that level of kind of saying, hey, this is what we do, then gives you the opportunity to kind of push back and say, well, do you really need it, that way or that fast? I don't work after 6, I work weekdays until 6. My own personal boundaries now, I don't work after 6. I don't work on weekends. And I mean, I break the rules occasionally, but nobody holds that against me now because I've just said, this is what I'm doing, right? This is how my business works.
Well, and I'm so glad you addressed response times because you can say it as simply as that. And then you can make them feel like they have a little bit of control by saying, I only check it between 9 to 5 on weekdays. But if something is genuinely urgent after those hours, you can text me and I'll get back to you within an hour if you text me, but only if it's a true emergency. And you can put in your scope of work with them or your contract if the emergency is violent. Like if somebody uses the emergency line when it's not a true emergency, they can get like 3 strikes and then they're out. So everything is just in simple terms, like laid out for them to see. And then it's not mean, it's you're protecting your time. But you know what? Your relationship is really important to me. So if there is an actual emergency, you can text me, but please use that for emergencies only. because then it kind of keeps the conversation open.
I'm going to give you an idea, and you're going to think I'm joking, but I'm
Oh
really not.
gosh.
So
Okay.
let's imagine that you have I don't know. Let's say it's either a consulting business or a coaching business of some kind, and the people that you work with have the ability to message you, and you have two plans. You have the regular plan and the premium plan. And the regular plan um, is you're available for messaging between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Central Time, and you'll respond within 2 hours during the work hours. And then the premium plan is that you will respond immediately, uh, up until midnight, night, weekdays and weekends. But the premium plan costs 10 times more than the regular plan. Nobody's going to
Yeah.
buy the premium plan, but they're all going to know they didn't pay for it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, that just kind of says, well, obviously I'm not going to get that because I didn't want to pay 10 times the other amount. And it's, I'm being a little bit facetious with the 10 times maybe, but honestly, just price it the way you would, what would make it worth your while to be available like that? Maybe there's an amount of money that would, maybe there isn't, but if there is, put it in there,
Yeah.
and then that way nobody expects it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so we're kind of talking about like response times, working hours, and all of that. But then there are other boundaries that don't really revolve around these two categories. One of them is scope creep. And I feel like a lot of boundaries get blurred when it comes to scope creep, especially when things are very clearly laid out in a scope of work.
Right. And let's define scope creep just in case somebody doesn't know what it means. But it's like you agree to do X, and the next thing it's like, well, X, we're doing X, but all of a sudden, oh, could you do this? Or it would really be nice if it did this, or if you did that. And now X becomes 2X or 1.5X the
Yeah.
amount of work that you budgeted. So that's scope creep, and it will happen. It is just in the nature of reality somehow. I don't know how it worked, but the universe decided that scope creep was something that it was going to do whenever it could.
Yes. Yes. And people get nervous to push back because then they're like, well, if I don't do what my client asked me to do, like, are they going to fire me? But it can be a very simple response by simply saying, yeah, I can absolutely do that. It's outside the current scope. So let me send you a quick estimate for adding it on. It's
Called
calm,
a
it's
change order.
professional, no drama. You're not saying no. You're saying yes. And here's what it costs. So that you protect
It's
yourself, but also give the client what they want.
right. And that's why starting with a statement of work is really a powerful way to avoid this. So you basically have this document where you scope out the um, the nature of the job, what's going to be done, when it's going to be done. And I have a document that lays this out for solopreneurs. It's kind of a draft version that they can use to adapt. If you email me at joe@lifestar.com, just put statement of work or SOW in the subject line, and I'll send it back. I'll send it over to you.
And
But
he really will.
I will.
Yeah, it'll
I
be
will
him.
when I check my email.
Yes,
But
exactly.
it won't happen immediately. But the idea here is that by scoping that out, and then in there you actually talk about change orders and that it will be priced at $200 an hour or whatever, plus materials if that's applicable. But you just put it all in there, and then they come back and they say, "Gee, it'd be really great if we could add another section to this particular report you're doing." You go, great, okay, that's going to take 3 hours, and it's $150 an hour or whatever. So that's $450, and I'll send you a change order, they call it, and that you would send a document, simple document, says this is what we're going to do, this is how the scope has changed. Everybody signs it, send a check, or pay online or whatever, and everybody's happy, and nobody feels like they've gotten taken advantage of. But just setting up in front with that statement of work is the magic that prevents scope creep.
So magical. But also, like, let's say you're working with a client that doesn't have a very big budget and they really need this and you really want to do well for them, but you're also like, oh, but I really want to get paid and blah, blah, blah. You can also say, I'm happy to add that in. I'll swap it with this other deliverable I was going to do for you to keep us on time on the timeline or to keep us in scope, or I can add it for an extra fee. So you can also swap it for something else you're doing if you really care about, like, if the client doesn't have a huge budget and you have a good relationship with them, that's another alternative is by swapping something you were planning on doing. And so that way you kind of work with the client on that.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to work with people if you can. I mean, you might not have anything you can take out,
Yeah.
but it's just, the idea of being expected to do extra work for free is, it's not fair, but yet somehow it becomes easy to ask for when you're on the client side. Like I said, I'm not quite sure how that works, but I've experienced it many, many times. Um, yeah, I could tell I could tell war stories. I won't. Just a short podcast, but it's definitely something to watch out for. So, what else
Mhm.
do we have in terms of setting boundaries? We got schedule. We have scope creep.
Yeah, I think those are the big ones that come up the majority of the time that I really wanted to land on today. Do you have any others off the top of your head?
Yeah, I have one. Um, I've had this experience not as a solopreneur, but in another business that I have where I have some employees of how people treat us, or you know the 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 way that people speak, the way that people, that the relationship has to be respectful in both directions. And there are clients that aren't respectful, that are, they think because they're paying you money, they can talk down to you, they can yell at you, they can treat you badly, badmouth you, insult you, and that's a boundary that I am very much, in favor of enforcing. If you're gonna be rude, if you're gonna be insulting, if you're gonna be abusive, then we don't have a relationship. And I literally had a situation where one of the people in the property management company got yelled at for something completely outside of their fault, and I just said, okay, well, we're firing the client. And I told the client, we're done. And he said, can I apologize? And I said, okay. And the client apologized. And I mean, I just don't believe that you should ever take that. And it's surprising how many people will back down if you confront them and say, that's unacceptable. I am not going to, I'm not going to take that kind of behavior, that kind of talk, whatever it is. It's hard to put that in a contract, but it's easy to enforce it when somebody acts like that, and it's
Yeah.
very worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, in case you haven't picked up on this already, Joe is just like a really good guy. So he will stand up for what's right. And I'm sure that person appreciated it. But I guess moral of the story for all of this is boundaries will not cost you good clients. They'll reveal which clients were never going to be good ones in the first place. And that is not a loss. That is the filter working exactly as designed, which is why you should be setting boundaries. Any other examples, Joe, or is that all you have for today?
I think that covers it for now.
Alrighty. Well, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, leave us that 5-star review. It helps us spread the word to other solopreneurs looking to create a life first business. Share this episode with a friend, especially the friends that are not setting boundaries the way that they should, and you think they need to listen to this. And subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. And we'll see you next week on the Aspiring Solopreneur.